Oh, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into the program. It's time for another edition of the Audible. The Audible Live here on Thursday night, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. I'm your host, Cecil Lammy, and we are back in the throngs of training camp. Throngs, throws, whatever, of training camp. Bloom, it's good to be back in the Thursday night seat, and I want to first start off the show by thanking everyone for their love and support and thoughts and prayers as my mother's getting released from the hospital this week after a bout with pneumonia and 2 surgeries and one that didn't go very well and malnutrition and several other things that have made things very interesting. But I will say this. The thoughts and prayers and everything when I talked to Mom on Monday, which was her birthday, 71 years young, and I said, Mom, I got listeners in Australia that are, like, sending prayers your way, and she couldn't say much, but you could tell it made her day, and all of you out there showing your support was very, very helpful. I will say this for those that say, thoughts and prayers, we got to do more. Well, it starts with thoughts and prayers. And for the people that say, well, it doesn't work, well, yeah, it does. Because it's the power of positive thinking, the power of the human connection, and the power of the human spirit. So thank you all very, very much. And, get things back on the right track and get back in the saddle, Bloom. It feels good. What the hell are you wearing?
Yeah, this is a Steelers. This is speaking of our family, our readers, listeners, and look, thoughts and prayers work for helping us not feel alone in anything that we have to endure. We endure together. I think on my Twitter feed, we're here to help each other through this thing, whatever it is, and we do that. And this is from Dimitri Saliani, who is we're friends on Facebook, just an absolute peach gem of a human being. He was also the one who told me about Star Noodle in Maui, which is one of the best restaurants. So if you're in Maui, over on the Lahaina side, go to Star Noodle. So it's beautiful, and occasionally, just the way the love comes back around, whether it's through supporting us during tough times, whether it's through something that y'all see that makes you think of us, or other things that happen. And on that note, by the way, one of my ways to give back, Cease. So, if you're friends with me on Facebook, and I did tweet it out, I did put the world's worst workout. We need some stills from that. What color
don't
blue?
Get Matt started. He'll get all over that.
What color blue was that? He's like the baby blue spandex.
Titans blue.
Titans blue. So this is the 2009. Right? This is the 2009 Draft Guys TV. So I still have a lot of these DVDs that I'll be giving away. So this week on my Twitter feed, I'll give another one. But it's beautiful. I mean, football's back. The community never goes away. And in a real way, fantasy football and football, well, we rally around it and we really love it and enjoy it. It is the human connection. It is the community. It is the way that we find each other, just the way the four of us have been brought into each other's lives, and the way that starts things in motion. It's really a beautiful thing to be part of, and when football's back, it's easy to get the buzz off of drinking from the fire hose and 32 teams information, but it's really that we're all occupying the space together and enjoying the journey together, which is the best part of this.
Family, the connection, when I get a text from Matt Waldman, from any of you three, and anyone that showed support, Twitter, text, whatever, it's like, that's what it is, man. It's that family, it's that connection. And Matt, appreciate you as always, man. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, and I want to thank some folks in Australia as well, because the Aussie guys on NFL, Greg and the crew, Adrian and the crew, sent me a care package, and I finally got it today. It's the RSPA care package over here, which a bunch of really great stuff, including this scarf of what I hear is the Australian rules football version of the Cleveland Browns, which shows you that in the southern hemisphere they wear Steelers colors for the Browns team. So I imagine that the version of the Steelers in Australian rules football must be brown and orange. So it only goes to say this will be the one Steelers looking colors I'll wear where I'm not staining a fence.
Next thing you know, you'll be wearing some Australian John Elway jersey, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. It'll probably be I don't know, blue and white with a horseshoe on it.
In Bizarro Land, John Elway played for the Colts.
Right. And of course,
or a Mayflower van.
something. It's a new
Still bitter.
pipeline down there in Australia for NFL talent. At least that's what it could be. Anyway, Dr. Gene Bramall, welcoming into the program. Good evening, as you like to say.
Yes, good evening. I'm really happy to hear that your mom's doing well. We should probably send out some good vibes to Morrill Tremblay as well, who's going through some
very much so.
rough stuff. Got a lot of good news this week, but he's still got a little ways to go. So, Morrill, if you're listening, we're thinking about you, and we'll send the positive vibes of the entire Audible community your way, too.
He didn't care much for it anyway.
That's correct.
Well, it is time to jump into the injury segment of tonight's program. Also, probably take a couple of Twitter questions a little bit later on. Who knows what will happen on this show, because we are feeling quite salty this evening. But Dr. Gene, I want to start with the Denver Broncos' DeMarcus Ware. And I know that there are rumors and buzz. I'm not going to give credit to rumors that are not from good sources, but just know that the talk is out there that maybe something's worse with DeMarcus Ware's back than we're being led on. I will say it was a bit shocking. One, that he's on the NFI list, because I thought this was a football injury. And two, we haven't seen him since the Super Bowl. No OTAs, no mini camp, no participation whatsoever. I see DeMarcus every day. He's, moving fine, jogging, heavy jogging fine. No helmet, anything like that, just in a warm-up suit, basically. Is there something to be concerned about here with a player, who's up there and going to be playing a part-time role, but having a back injury? Anytime you mess with the core, it's kind of a dangerous thing. What do you feel is going on with DeMarcus Ware's back? Something to see, or much ado about nothing?
Remind me, did he have surgery for this last year at any point? I know he was struggling.
No, and that's where the rumors buzz in. It's like, he misdiagnosed, and he should have had surgery, and he didn't. And
I don't know if you go that far necessarily, but whenever you hear about these frequent and relapsing back conditions, you wonder if there's a herniated disc. And a lot of times players will have cortisone injections, and you can only have so many of those over a short to mid-term period of time. And maybe they were able to manage it last year. Who knows? Since he's on the NFI, maybe something happened when he was away from the team during these off-season workouts that caused a little bit of a setback there, and they're debating on whether or not the cortisone injection is going to do something this time. I'm just freely speculating here, but yes, you have to wonder at his age, with previous issues in the past, whether or not you're looking at a degenerative condition, and the most common one of those is herniated discs and everything that goes along with that. So depending on where in the back it is, the lower the better, so to speak. If it's a little bit higher, or if there's more than one disc involved, you could be looking at more than what J.J. Watt and so many other players over the past few years have gone through, where they just take a little bit of that disc material out. Sometimes players need fusions, those sorts of issues as well. It really all depends on exactly what the condition is, what they've tried so far, and how much pain he's willing to try to play through. And it's not just pain as much as it is weakness and range of motion. So the longer this goes on, the more worrisome it's going to be, obviously. And if he doesn't recover quickly in the cortisone shot, again, if this is what's going on, is not going to work, then we may be here about him having surgery sooner than later. And again, with J.J. Watt's situation, we talked about in the past couple of weeks, this can be every bit of an 8 to 10 week recovery period, even though you'll probably hear something shorter than that. And players often don't feel themselves for a while after that. So that may explain why, if something has happened in the recent few weeks to months, that they're trying to temporize him rather than going to surgery right away. But again, that's all just me speculating on what common things may be going on here. It could certainly be something different than that that's holding him out a little bit longer. We just don't know about yet.
If your good knee is the one that's keeping you on the sidelines, you might be Jordy Nelson, Gene. Jordy. Okay, a good piece from Rob Domofsky a couple of days ago at ESPN, and he said that while Nelson said that his left knee, the good knee, tendonitis, did not require surgery, he would not elaborate when asked if he had any type of medical procedure on the knee. And then you have Aaron Rodgers. Here's Aaron Rodgers' quote. "We're going to need a little bit of time, not necessarily game reps, but some reps in practice. He's going to need to feel press coverage again and getting off of that and running and making plays and catches. I'm confident he'll get to a point where he'll be ready to play when we need him. And Rob Domofsky just inferred, I think correctly, that the quarterback himself seemed prepared for the possibility that he might not get any preseason game action with his number one receiver. And I asked you this behind the scenes on Twitter, but let's prepare for that possibility, Gene. Jordy Nelson, we find out Jordy Nelson, he's going to be fine, but he's not going to play in the preseason. Because I don't know about you, Gene, I haven't seen any signs that he's ready to return to practice soon. And we're getting into training camp where if this was just a blip like it was with Adrian Peterson, then we would be hearing something. So this obviously impacts Aaron Rodgers, it impacts Randall Cobb, it's the whole offense. We saw it last year. Where are we at right now? And if it comes across our timeline at some point, Jordy Nelson will return to practice, but probably not play in the preseason. What should we do with him?
So a few things. I think any of the directions you're going here are warranted. I think you can make an argument that it's probably not a huge issue yet. You can make an argument that it's time to really be concerned. I don't think anything that Aaron Rodgers said has me worried. Even though we saw Jordy Nelson start to run some routes November, December of last year and participate in OTAs a little bit, he's correct that players coming off an ACL injury, Rodgers is correct, they need to get back into it a little bit. They need to feel their legs underneath them. They need to get back into football conditioning, all those things that we talk so much about, and be ready to show that he's able to do that. And he just hasn't yet. So that would have happened in the first couple of weeks had it not been for this little setback with the other leg, the reconditioning injury. So I don't think anything in Rodgers' comments there is of immediate concern, although it points to the concern you have. At what point do we get worried that Jordy Nelson isn't showing that he's over the ACL injury and isn't showing that whatever type of tendonitis he has in the other knee is behind him? And I think we'll see the Packers be conservative about this. What you don't want to do is rush him back a week early, have him have a different cascade injury, or find out that this particular injury that he's got now gets re-aggravated and lingers into the season. When you talk about tendons, and we'll probably talk about Josh Doctson here pretty soon too and his Achilles injury, you can see how guys try to come back, they think they're close, they just don't feel right, and now I've got Dixon in a walking boot weeks, months after the original injury and after we saw him doing some ladder work and some stuff on the side. And that's what you want to avoid with Nelson here. If it means that he does not participate at all during the preseason so that they really minimize the risk of a setback so that he's ready for week 1 and week 2, and maybe he starts the season a little bit slowly until he gets his legs under him, fine. How soon do we have to be worried? I don't know. I don't, like so many other players, I think we've seen over the past 2 or 3 years more and more veterans with minor injuries are being held out of preseason altogether because there's no reason to risk them when other guys can get reps, especially when it's in an established offense with an established quarterback that they already know. So I'm not going to be too concerned if he doesn't recover, meaning that this is something that they're really worried about. I will be concerned that he hasn't shown us that he's over his ACL injury and this tendonitis yet, but if he doesn't do much until the very end of the preseason, comes back in week 4, practices all week leading up to game 1, then probably not much to be worried about. But that's, we're talking 5 weeks from that point yet, so there's a lot of discussion yet to come. He could very easily come off PUP next week or the week after and not have any concerns at all.
Yeah, before I ask my question, I'll just add that I think that makes total sense with the concern about his health. But from a rapport standpoint, James Jones came in a week before the season and was torrid when he began the year and hadn't even played with them for a year. So it's just something worth noting. Another receiver who seems to always be having an issue for the past couple of years is also in that division, Alshon Jeffery. So what's going on there, and what's your thoughts long term with him now?
Yeah, same as last year, right? So we're hearing mild tightness in both hamstrings. We heard this from John Fox pretty much this very same time of year last year, day to day. 28 days later, he's still not recovered. So it's too soon to know whether or not this is going to go that way or not, but it's pretty disappointing that a player, knowing that he's pushing for a contract, knowing that he's had hamstring issues in the past, is dealing with it again. And it may be nothing that Jeffery has done wrong, and it probably isn't. Whether it's bad luck or whether it's in the same location that he's had tightness and issues in the past because he's got some scar tissue left over are things we're not going to know. So you're resetting the clock here. If he returns to practice as Julio Jones did after 3 or 4 days, there's no harm, no foul. If this bleeds into next week and the week after, or we hear any signs of a setback between now and the middle of August, then it's time to be concerned because it's something that's likely to linger. Only nice thing about guys getting hamstring injuries now is that they've got 4 to 6 weeks to recover before week 1 of the regular season. So even if it is on, the rougher side of a low grade or a mid grade type injury, they've got enough time to hopefully get over the injury and recondition before week 1 starts. But Jeffery has been the kind of the poster boy for what we've been talking about for hamstring injuries and reconditioning injuries over the past couple of weeks, and here he is again in the same situation. We're not going to get anything out of Chicago. He comes back when he comes back, and you got to hope that it's sooner than later.
Yeah, John Fox and his antiquated media policy. Thanks for that, Foxy. How about you win first, and then you can implement that. Speaking of hamstrings, I want to ask you about Ezekiel Elliott and how you feel about the rookie running back, because Lord knows fantasy owners don't need any reason to be scared. There's a lot of people, when you suggest, I'm taking Ezekiel Elliott in top 3 picks of my draft or top 5 picks, what have you, as a rookie and he hasn't done it. Well, I don't need to wait for a guy to do something before I can say I want to spend that premium pick on a talent like that. In a way, Gene, this reminds me, we talked about this on the preseason watch list, which is underway right now, about halfway through the NFL, in our team-by-team preview. In a way, it reminds me a bit of when LaDainian Tomlinson was a rookie and held out, and it was right up to the start of the season, and so many, oh my God, what's he going to do? And LaDainian Tomlinson was just fine. So kind of in that same vein of a hamstring injury, he's going to get some time, but I take that talent that Elliott has, I take that offensive line, I look how they want to protect Tony Romo. I'm still excited. I'm not too concerned about the hamstring injury right now for Elliott, although I'm watching it closely. What are your thoughts, Dr. Gene?
Yeah, same thing. I think I'm right there with you. Very similar to Alshon Jeffery, we're going to see some caution. The Cowboys are going to make sure that he's fully recovered. Maybe it was, that unfortunate word tweak. We don't know exactly what that means, and it is a minor injury. The first little blurb that came out made it sound like this was going to be, more than just a couple of days, maybe more along the lines of a 2 to 4 week situation. It still may be that. Ed Werder's tweet a little bit later in the day, I think this was it yesterday? All these days are running together for me. That it wasn't as big a deal, and it was truly a day-to-day type situation. But I think the angle that I'll bring up here is that we talk about this a lot during this time of year, and even in the regular season. At least a third of players sometimes re-aggravate, but aggravate their first injury in the first 7 to 14 days when they come back. So not only do we have to be paying attention to how quickly they recover with the first injury, but make sure they get through that first week to 10 days without a re-injury type situation as we go. And I think that's going to be key for Elliott. We've got a rookie going through their first off season. He's got a little bit of an injury here. He wants to get on the field as soon as possible, and that is going to be balanced against the Cowboys knowing that they want to give him a lot of carries. But we've seen the Cowboys kind of push players back if players are willing to do so. So you hope Elliott takes a little bit extra time off if he needs it so that he can come back and recondition. If it's a low-grade injury, 1 to 2 weeks, he's got another couple of weeks to condition, and we're ready to go for week 1. So I think I wouldn't say that's the best case scenario necessarily, because he could be back some point this week if all is just really, really minor. But just things that we're going to have to watch and see how they develop.
Matt Forte with a hamstring. Already, Todd Bowles says he doesn't expect Forte to play in the first preseason game, so we're talking a week and a half out. Now, the first preseason game isn't exactly crucial for a veteran like Forte in a new offense, but still. So we can't necessarily get too alarmed, but he is in that zone of his career where we're looking for that cliff. We're looking for signs that his body's just not going to respond the way it should. What have you been reading into or trying to not read into in this Forte hamstring injury to open? And this is one that happened before training camp, right?
Yeah, and I think they've let him come back to practice a little bit this week. I don't know that he's taking full contact drills, but they've cleared him to return. But they're not going to rush him much. The nice thing about Forte so far is that he's had some MCL injuries, he had some other injuries, mild high ankle sprains that he's come back from in the same year and done just fine. So yeah, the cliff is probably coming at some point, but he hasn't shown any evidence that he's not going to be able to recover from injury. outside the range of normal. So I think what to watch for here is if the Jets have somebody step up that's playing really well, that can maybe eat into some of the game planning that they were already thinking that they would do for Forte over these first couple of preseason games. That's probably more of concern at this point. Do they find another option that they trust? Is that Bilal Powell? Is that somebody else? Or does Forte really not miss much by taking his time and coming back? This is the time of year where we've got to speculate a lot on those sorts of things, but we're going to have a lot more information about all these guys after another couple of weeks goes by.
Gene, Tevin Coleman, he rolled his foot Tuesday. He was out for practice, or rolled his foot Wednesday. He's out for practice today. Can you talk about the possibilities of what that might be and how long he could possibly miss?
Yeah, not without seeing the injury itself or getting too much information from Atlanta. This is going to be another one of those situations where we're reliant entirely on what the coach and the player has to say, knowing that none of these guys are going to get rushed back the first week of August. Rolling of the foot sounds different than rolling of the ankle. Lots of different things there could be in there. We saw Julio Jones kind of be described as a tweak and end up possibly having a plantar fasciitis situation, is what Dr. David Chow sort of identified after looking at some images of him standing on the sidelines at practice and how they were treating him. So lots of things could be going on with the foot. We've seen anything from nothing to Le'Veon Bell's injury was described as, a mild sprain of the foot a couple of years ago during his rookie season, and he ended up being out for a good 6 to 8 weeks. So until we get some more information from the team, it's going to be hard to speculate.
And back to Cecil.
Muting. I got to get out of that habit of muting the microphone, man. You guys are giving me bad habits. Mute the microphone.
Don't watch
back
them.
in action, live here, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. Going through some injury notes with Dr. Gene Bramall. Let's do another turn, and we'll jump into the news and see what's on the minds of fantasy owners out there. Pete Carroll, Dr. Gene, saying that, commenting on two players, Jimmy Graham making progress, getting, quote, really close to coming off the PUP list. According to Pete Carroll, he's pushing really hard in his effort to return. Thomas Rawls, same quote, getting really close. According to head coach Pete Carroll, remains on the PUP list right now, whereas I feel interested about Rawls, and it's, exciting to consider what he could do upon his return. With Jimmy Graham, I feel, okay, the offense was better without him last year. So your thoughts on these two Seahawks now coming off the PUP list soon?
Hopefully. As they opened camp, Pete Carroll said he was looking at these first couple of weeks in 4-day blocks. That's sort of the way they had blocked out the practice schedule to give guys a little bit of time off in between some pretty extensive practice work. And we're past that 4 days now. The reevaluation has apparently happened, and they didn't come off PUP list toward the end of this week. So that would suggest that they're probably not going to do much through the weekend, and we're going to see another reevaluation at the beginning of next week. Rawls, we're sort of still waiting. It was confirmed today that he did have surgery after all, which is kind of what our spidey senses were telling us from the beginning. There was one small report about that in January and not much else. And as we talked about last month, really doesn't matter right now. Right now what we're waiting to see is how quickly he can recover and be cleared to return after that ankle injury. And again, not too much falling behind with Rawls right now. The key is going to be making sure that he recovers without any setbacks over the next month. So if Rawls doesn't come off PUP list until the first preseason week of games, probably not a problem. The longer this goes, though, knowing that the surgery happened in January and we're pushing almost 8 months of recovery time here, you have to worry about why he is not clearing that last stage of rehab as quickly as you'd like him to. But we're not at that point yet. And Rawls was weight-bearing way back in March. Everything through the preseason sounded fine. So hopefully they're just, like so many of these other players, watching him condition at the team facility where he really hasn't been over the last 4 to 6 weeks, and making sure they're completely comfortable with him, knowing that while they did draft and add a whole bunch of players, including Kristen Michael and CJ Prosise and lots of other guys, some of those players are injured and they really don't have a whole lot of depth to rely on behind Rawls, so they're going to give him every chance to recover that they can. I'm with you on Jimmy Graham. I'm still hopeful that we're going to see some of these players, Victor Cruz and Jimmy Graham in particular, recover from patellar tendon injuries in such a way that we're not going to have to be as worried about this injury in the future. But until that happens, it hasn't happened yet. So, we're going to see in the next month or so. I think we're right up against it. It's 8 months post-surgery for Graham right now. 8 to 9 months is right where you kind of hope players return from these patellar tendon tears. So we're going to see where we get with this and hope for the best. But I think we're going to see Rawls come off before Graham, and hopefully that happens in the next 7 to 10 days.
Gene, Arian Foster is healthy. Now, is it time for us to revise potentially our thoughts about running backs coming back from Achilles? Is it time for us to revise thoughts about Arian Foster and yoga and his brother's training regimen? And obviously, we're still waiting to see if he can get through camp healthy. But right now, all the momentum behind him.
Yeah, he's kind of on a prove-it type situation for us, right? No, I don't think we're revising our concern for Achilles injuries, although I don't think you can point to an elite, proven running back who's had this injury. All of the players that have had this injury in the past really haven't been proven running backs. I mean, the closest you've gotten over the past few years has been Kendall Hunter, has been Mikel LaSure, those sorts of players. There have been some others as well, but they've not been players that have been 300-touch successful athletes in the past. So Arian Foster is going to be another good test case with this. It's really good that he's made it through the off-season recovery period without a setback. It's even better that we're going on, 8 to 10 days, maybe not quite that long, but going on more than a week of consecutive practices after he passed his physical, that whole blip of 24 hours on PUP notwithstanding, and hasn't had any issues. But this is Arian Foster. We know that these things can and have come up at any time, and it's really great to see that he's the healthiest back in Miami camp right now. And he's got time to show everybody that he may be able to do what they were hoping Jay Ajayi was able to do while he's out now. But I still think we have to consider Foster week to week. We know that when healthy, he is one of the best running backs in the league over time. So we'll have to wait and see how this goes. But for now, all systems look like they're go. There's a long way before week 1, though.
Gene, just curious, wondering if these guys were the culprits for helping Mike Wallace get in shape
There it is.
for camp right now.
Oh.
Look at the karaokes right there.
Oh.
Those are just beautiful. And then
No
we got-
coordination.
There are no words.
I like the punch, though. I mean, look at the punch there. It's rocking the guy. And we got
There's a lot of pain and rage behind those eyes, man.
Embarrassment. Just the lengths we would go to.
So we've been doing these Hangouts live on video for 2 years now. This is the second year or the third year?
Third year, I think.
Third year, yeah.
I feel like those of you who listen to this in podcast form through the weekend after Thursday night generally are not missing much. I can't say that today. If you generally look at this in podcast form, you should go to, I don't know, is there a timestamp on here yet? Somewhere in the range of 30 minutes into the Google Hangout Live and follow up on some of this video because...
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube, so just...
The world
I haven't looked at the comment section because the YouTube comment section is usually not very kind, so I'm like, yeah, I don't need to read that. I'm not as round as I used to be, though.
I almost got...
right smelt now.
I don't think you did yourself any favors with your attire, Cecil.
No.
No, but it takes cojones. I would say that, and I'm definitely.
And we know
the
the admiration does not lack.
That they draw attention to it 10 years later again. Yes.
Oh
Very
yeah.
impressive.
No, definitely. This was. I almost got kicked off an airplane laughing so hard when I saw this the first time. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, really round.
Gene, nothing we could do to improve that, right?
Yeah, there's lots of things that you can do to improve that.
It's called eating right and doing more exercise.
See, so we shouldn't tell Dr. Gene about our gout then, because he's not going to like that.
No, not at all. Not at all. But Bloom, you need some of this. You need a lot of big jug of this. Yeah, so, hey, yeah, that thing you told me that'd work. Oh, jeez.
I got some water.
That'll work. That'll work. That is the section with Dr. Gene Bramall, and it's presented by the Football Guys Players Championship, the 2016 Football Guys Players Championship, the FPC. Drafts have already kicked off, and they'll be ongoing daily through the start of the NFL season on September 8th. Make sure to check it out. The 2016 Football Guys Players Championship features a $250,000 grand prize and more than $1.8 million in total prizes. Not a typo. Championship round prizes paying down to 650th place. League prizes are $2,000 with $1,500 for first place and $500 for second. Contest is capped at 6,900 teams, and all prizes are guaranteed. Entire prize pool is escrowed for the ultimate in prize protection. $350 to enter. You can buy a 3-pack of teams for $1,000 and save $50. And for anyone nervous about drafting their FPC team too early, don't be. There are now 2 preseason free agency processes scheduled for September 2nd and the 7th, so you'll have a chance to pick up that hot training camp free agent or replace an injured kicker before the season starts. That's the Football Guys Players Championship. Check it out right now at footballguys.com. Bloom, speaking of September 2nd, you're going to be here for our Fan Football Fest.
Yes,
in Denver.
Everybody. Come out to Denver, everyone. We won't get to do drinks. Steve Bartolik, who was able to meet up with him and his wonderful special lady last year, among other people. Chris out there, everyone's coming up. Millhouse, my man, also got to meet him and many other people. So I won't be doing drinks after, but I will be at Dick's for Fish because we love Dick's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So here in the Audible family, in the Fish family, and in Denver and going to the shows. But it'll be Friday afternoon, fantasy football tips, and it's going to be fantastic. Who doesn't love a trip to Denver? Who doesn't love a trip to the home of the Rocky Mountain High?
Now we need to get Matt Waldman out here, Matt. And I'm going to start with you in the news section because our man, Andrew Hawkins, said that Corey Coleman, rookie wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns, reminds him of Steve Smith. Now, young baby Hawk saying that, certainly going to listen to things that Hawk say about this teammate, about this direction of Corey Coleman. We know the speed makes him an exciting prospect, someone to consider in your fantasy drafts. But where and what happens when Josh Gordon comes back? Because young baby Hawk says Steve Smith. Our man Lance Zierlein had said John Brown. But either way, you like those comparisons. What are your thoughts? And specifically the comparison to Steve Smith. What are you doing with Corey Coleman? And what are you doing because Josh Gordon is going to come back?
Well, I think what you're going to do is you're going to draft him in the rounds that the available area that he is, which is probably somewhere in rounds 8 to 10. I think is probably where you can get him, and feel pretty comfortable about the fact that he's showing some good signs of getting off press. I mean, and the way that Hawkins probably compares him is that he's got that lightning quickness, and he's a rugged player, especially after the catch. And that's something that is very Smith-like. I don't know if he's got that mutant-like strength for his size the way that Smith did. That, and also, when I watch Coleman, he's got a ways to go when it comes to making plays in tight coverage against physical coverage. And it's not that he can't do it. I honestly thought, just from watching him, he often seemed surprised when someone actually was able to keep their hands on him down the field, and it distracted him a little bit, but it wasn't something that got to him. It was just kind of like, oh, wait a minute, you're still here? And it was something that kind of disrupted his concentration a bit. I think once he gets used to the fact that he's going to be playing that kind of football, it's not going to bother him, because I've seen him take contact. I've seen him run through people, be able to bounce off hits. It's not a factor of I'm afraid of taking a hit. It's just more of I'm not used to someone actually being even close to being good enough to cover me man coverage press style. And so it's just going to take some practice. But right off the line, when someone tries to jam him, you don't just try and be the aggressor and bully him, because if you do that and you're off balance, you'll end up on an Instagram clip on Twitter, which is pretty much what happened to Justin Gilbert tried to do to him recently, and it didn't work out very well. But I think that when it comes to Gordon versus Coleman, the advantage that Coleman will have is that rapport with Griffin right away, and a little bit more playing time, where with Griffin you have to worry about compensatory injuries of coming back and trying to go full bore too early, and so for me the upside isn't as great as Gordon at this stage, because Gordon has proven, at least in the past, that the only other guy that could be in the conversation with him might be Julio Jones and Calvin Johnson in terms of just absolute freakish skill and what they can do to take over a game or a season. But when it comes to downside, Coleman has less downside than Gordon at this stage.
Bloom, we've talked a lot about players that are going to take a little time to get going this season, Le'Veon Bell, Tom Brady, etc. What are your thoughts on Gordon, and specifically that mesh eventually with Robert Griffin III? I was talking to Tyler Columbus today, retired offensive lineman, although I don't know if he wants me to say this, but teams are calling, including the Bears have called him, and he's saying no for right now. But he played with Robert Griffin III during his rookie year in Washington, and he said, if this guy is healthy and he commits to that offense of Hugh Jackson and doesn't fight it the way that he fought Shanahan, no question he can have a bounce-back season. And everyone's looking for these reclamation, like rekindle their career, and people talk about that being Mark Sanchez. I'll say after a week of practice, it's not going to be Mark Sanchez, but it could be Robert Griffin III with Gordon, with Coleman. Nice weapons there in Cleveland.
Yeah. Well, we outlined this, I think, on the couch, where I think if you take Gordon in that 7th, 8th, 9th round range, it's a bet purely on talent, and those bets do work out. You're missing the first 4 games. You need to get over this injury, but all the buzz around him, and I think that this could be consistent with creating good buzz around him to give him confidence, or it could be consistent with really he's not the person he's been depicted as, and he is going to be ready. And there was one comment, I don't know if it was Tony Grossi, but basically saying they're confident in him trying to see this opportunity because he knows this is it. So, Corey Coleman is a player in that range. Sterling Shepard's a player in that range. A little bit earlier, Kevin White, Devontae Parker. But that's the point in your draft where you're looking for the speculative upside wide receivers. I think that Gordon's a fine pick in that territory just because we know his ceiling. We know he's only 25 years old. I think as long as you're making those kinds of picks in that range of your draft, you're doing well. And, another player that I'll point out is yet another piece. Speaking of the drumbeat, I've got to do this because Matt is still wearing his Pittsburgh colors. Sammie Coates. Don Banks was at Steelers training camp in Latrobe, and Sammie Coates continues. Everybody who's going to Steelers training camp is coming away very impressed with him. So those kinds of picks from round 6 or 7 on are the picks you're looking at wide receiver, not depth picks. Not somebody who you're going to be fine plugging in a bye week or injury situation, because those kinds of players are always available on the waiver wire.
Matt, what are we expecting from Sammie Coates? I want to go back to you quickly before going to Dr. Gene. I just feel like we've seen this story before, and we've seen these incredibly athletic, and a different player, granted, from Sammie Coates, but we all remember the story of Troy Williamson, like, oh my God, he's getting open on everybody. You just can't catch anything. Like, can Sammie Coates turn that around?
I think that it's just going to be the biggest test is whether or not he's going to be able to track the ball over his head. If he can do that, then you're going to have a complete player, and he's going to be very dangerous. If he shows that weakness still, that tracking the ball becomes an issue, then it's going to be more about how Todd Haley and Ben Roethlisberger use him. And if they can use him in a way where he can act more as a rebounder and face up the football, or that he's going to be running breaking routes back to the quarterback or running across the field to make plays and be able to have room after the catch, then he's still going to be a very good fantasy prospect for you who can make plays. He just may not be that complete receiver, and as we know, most of the time it's the complete receivers who are the primary guys who translate to wide receiver ones in fantasy football.
Dr. Gene, what are the Bengals going to do at tight end? Already with the Tyler Eifert situation, now Tyler Kroft out 4 to 6 weeks with a knee thing. We did the preseason watch list, in fact, released today, I believe, on the Bengals, and brought up Ryan Hewitt, like, hey, he's a Colorado guy, got that extension. Maybe he can play a little H-back for this team, because already, I mean, Brandon LaFell's not going to replace Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu. I mean, we're waiting on Boyd. We know it's all about A.J. Green, but man, Andy Dalton needs some help and at tight end, he's not going to get it for a while.
Gio Bernard. I think that's
Or
what you're
Gio.
100 catches.
I think you're going to see Gio move into the slot. I think you're going to see them use him in lots of different ways. I got a chuckle today on Twitter watching Sigmund school one of the newer Cincinnati beat writers on
Oh, no.
all things.
I felt so
Injury
bad about
related.
that.
Wait, what's
Like,
this? What's this?
I
A
could tell-
Twitter shaming?
Oh, man.
No,
I
it wasn't
really-
that bad. Essentially,
Good. Thank you, Doc.
no, it was fine. I mean, I think Joe's. This is his second year as
Yeah.
maybe even he started partway through last year, and he came at it from the perspective was, all I can do is report what they tell me, and we see this a lot in Cincinnati where there's not a whole lot of challenging going on, and Marvin Lewis and all those guys, and you get the same old nonsense, and I don't mean nonsense in a negative term for Marvin Lewis, just nonsense that it's nonsense. It's nonsensical stuff that he says when he reports, and Bloom just sort of tagged on a tweet today from this beat writer that said, Tyler Eifert, we still don't know where he's going to be, and Croft is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, and Bloom was saying, well, the Bengals never really give you any information in the interview. Well, I can only report what there is to report. So
let me interject really quickly. He said 4 to 6 weeks won't interfere with his week 1 availability, which already 6 weeks interferes
Right,
with potential week 1 availability. And then there were other people too that piled on Gene, who told him add 2 weeks. Someone said Sigma's just doing the rightful math of adding 2 weeks to anything the Bengals say about any injury.
Well, I think it just piles on Mark Twain from 200 years ago almost now. Everything happens 10 years later in Cincinnati, including players recovering from injury. So what we heard on Croft was hyperextension. Now you're hearing knee sprain in 4 to 6 weeks, which makes me think PCL. And we've seen PCL injuries be 2 to 4 week things. We've seen them be 6 to 8 week plus things because you're just not quite sure how they're going to heal. Now, that's taking very limited information and taking it out to something very specific, but you have to worry about, you're exactly right there. If that's what's going on, they're putting a very narrow timetable on an injury where it's very difficult to do that. So it could very easily be 4 weeks, a week or two of practice, and Tyler Croft is ready to assume some of Tyler Eifert's snaps in week 1. The other thing that we didn't really talk about in the injury section was Tyler Eifert. One of the other beat writers, Jay Morrison, who doesn't really get a whole lot of run in Cincinnati, he's kind of working for a smaller outfit right now. Everybody was focused on Tyler Eifert's comments about, I'm not going to play in the Pro Bowl anymore. Well, Morrison looked down and saw that the scar was on the inside of Tyler Eifert's ankle, which means he had a different procedure than what most of us, I don't think I saw anybody speculate that it was an inside of the ankle situation. That's a harder ligament to repair. It's a ligament that takes a little bit longer. The surgeon who did the procedure, if you look at his rehab protocol, he puts in caps, take it slow, in the between months 2, 3, and 4, and most of his players don't come back for 5 months. So I think after seeing that little bit of blurb from Morrison on Eifert, I think we're probably leaning more towards Eifert starting the season on PUP than starting in week 1. Now that doesn't rule out that he could come back in week 2, 3, or 4, and a lot is going to depend on how he recovers after he comes out of the walking boot this week. But I think we need to be preparing for the fact that we might not see Eifert until October some point. So you hope that Croft comes back a little bit sooner. But to answer the original question, we had already heard that Bernard was going to be used out of the slot a little bit, and maybe it's not going to be a tight end that they use this way this year for the first half of the season, potentially, but Bernard. So I don't think I'd worry about, they use Hewitt as a blocking back more than anything else. They don't really have anybody there. I guess that's what they're hopeful Tyler Boyd can come in and do, but do I have this right, or do I just have Tylers on the mind? Are they all Tylers? I think they're all Tylers.
They're all Tylers, yeah.
So I think that's what we're going to see. But I think the takeaway there is not just that Croft's timetable may be off, but I think we're going to hear more and more and more that Eifert isn't going to be back, Eifert isn't going to be back. And I think that what I've been saying from the beginning here is that I don't know that we're going to get any meaningful and actionable information on Eifert until they have to make a decision on whether or not he can come off PUP or not, because I just don't think they're going to do it during the preseason. Either he comes off and prepares for week 1 in some limited fashion, or it's going to be a while before he comes back.
Matt, Virgil Green caught 4 touchdowns today at Broncos practice. Now, it was a big tight end day, a heavy emphasis on tight end, but this is the true Kubiak system, and going back and forth with listeners today and going through my training camp notes as I do every day via Twitter. So if you have questions, just reach out to me there on the Broncos. Man, I'd love to see it. I really would. This is the true Kubiak system. They're going to run the ball all day long. When they go through the air, there's going to be some one-on-ones for Demaryius Thomas. Talked to him today, got some comments there. I'll tell later in the show. But Virgil Green showing up in such a huge way, also taking a kind of a hard fall on an end zone catch. Beautiful thing, Demaryius Thomas-esque. I don't want to say Calvin Johnson-esque, but just athleticism, speed. It's always been there, Matt. You've chronicled this with Virgil Green. Nobody's drafting this guy, but it's a tight end friendly system. Your thoughts? A guy that I always thought was Brandon Pettigrew, a guy that had become such a good blocker that they're just like, man, we're not gonna throw to him. He has a career high 12 catches. That's pathetic. He could catch 50 passes this year if he was the man. When I say he's catching 4 touchdowns and he's looking better, Jeff Hireman did make my notebook. He had 2 touchdowns himself today. But I had gone 4 days of training camp, including 2 days with pads, and 0 notes on Jeff Hireman. Like, yes, he made some plays today, but everyone oh, he's going to be – no, he's not doing anything. Green is showing up. Tight end friendly. Fantasy owners ignoring this guy right now. Should they be?
No, it's so much fun taking him at the end of every draft this summer because he was my number 1 ranked tight end in the RSP. It was the same year Julius Thomas came out. Then Elway drafted him and said we're going to use him as a blocker, and I was thinking, what is going on? Because you watch him at Nevada, and he was Colin Kaepernick's go-to guy. His blocking was well. He makes the effort. He's feisty, but he didn't really have that great of a technique, and he was a smaller dude back then. I mean, he was kind of more of a Shannon Sharp-esque kind of guy in terms of his body type, and when he made plays, he was physical, took hits, was able to go and get the ball and then win some yards after the catch. He was a dynamic athlete and one of the best combine performers in recent memory on top of that. So when I heard they're going to make him a blocker, I was thinking, this guy's not even going to make the team if that's what they're thinking at this stage. And then, lo and behold, he's known as a blocking tight end. I'm thinking his career's basically he's been put in a corner here, and he may never get out of that corner. But now with Julius Thomas gone, this is a very exciting development, and again, we're going to see whether or not he had issues being able to read defenses and make adjustments with his quarterback, because that's really the bigger deal. But if you think Ladarius Green is an impressive athlete, if you think he's a guy that you should be going nuts about, compared to Virgil Green, it's a no-brainer. Virgil Green was an even better pass receiver. So yeah, to me, this guy might be the steal of the draft if he continues to play the way that he did today.
Strong words from Matt Waldman. Everyone, tune in. That's a message. I always like to bring that up on the newswire at footballguys.com. Sigmund Anquan Boldin working from the slot. I don't care where he's working from. I kind of like that fit. I'm excited and interested because, as we saw last year, Boldin's not done.
No, he's not. And Matt did a good job laying out how if they're using him more like a tight end, more in the middle of the field, allowing him to use, he's not going to great separation, but we know that he can do things to stabilize this offense. They're going to have a hard time getting him off the field. I don't know that Boldin will have fantasy value on his own, but I think he can definitely mute the upside of Eric Ebron. I think that Boldin versus Ebron in the middle of the field, Ebron might be the more impressive athlete, but Boldin's the guy I'm going to rely on. One of the things, and I think this is not being talked about enough, Boldin in the slot moves Golden Tate to the outside. Now, Golden Tate on the outside is still a fantasy commodity that we're interested in, but we were looking at Golden Tate and thinking of him as running a lot of short and intermediate routes out of the slot, getting 100, 110, 120 catches without Calvin Johnson, getting into the third round of some of the MFL 10s I've done. If Boldin is basically the first-team slot receiver, maybe Tate can make up some of that with yards per catch, but I don't think all of it, not in PPR league. So I do think that the introduction of Boldin into this Detroit offense helps Matthew Stafford. I think it may hurt at least one, if not more than one, of the other pass catchers. And on a game-to-game basis, it will make it more difficult to predict who's going to have the big game, again, except for Stafford.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with the Detroit Lions. Dr. Gene, I wanted to ask you about Kenneth Dixon, the Ravens rookie running back, who have an appreciation for his quickness, certainly, and his agility. The knee injuries already turned to practice as of today, Thursday, August 4th. Good to see. Any lingering concerns here?
No, very good to see. Anytime you see a running back in particular, somebody that's got a plant and might be taking more hits on the outside of the leg where you've had an MCL injury, to see them recover within 7 to 10 days is an excellent indication that it was a very low-grade injury and that both the player and the team feels very comfortable moving on that leg. Always a risk of re-aggravation. I keep saying re-aggravation tonight. Aggravation, always a risk of aggravation. But I think we're going to be good to go here, and hopefully that means that we won't see any issues through the rest of the preseason.
Maybe he used one of those country moonshine remedies.
Might make you go blind. Watch out.
You got to watch out for that elixir and everything else that can make you go blind. Matt and Sigmund, I had a question from a Twitter follower with a username that I cannot say, but I appreciate him. And he's a metalhead, so he's always asking me, like, when you going to wear your Death Angel t-shirt out of Broncos camp? I'm like, yes, I will do that, although I might draw some looks from Coach Kubiak. About preseason, like a preseason, somebody nobody's talking about, I just threw out there, when he asked me this question a couple of days ago on my timeline, like, give me somebody preseason, nobody, I was like, Bruce Ellington. Bruce Ellington. Now, it's going to be interesting with San Francisco, what happens there at the quarterback position. I may have had it on my mind because San Francisco is going to do joint practices with Denver. I have off a cubicle at Dove Valley now. Like, I'll be there every day watching this guy. But I threw it out there. So let's hear your thoughts on Bruce Ellington as some sort of preseason. Like, wait a second, people should be taking note of this guy. And then if there's someone that you'd feel is a better answer for kind of a preseason breakout, then who would it be? So, Matt, I'll start with you. Thoughts on Bruce Ellington?
I like Bruce Ellington. I saw Bruce Ellington, to me, I've always described him as a Swiss Army knife that doubles as a jetpack fueled by a butane lighter. So he's he's
All right there, Dennis Miller.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. And what you like about him is that, unlike Jordan Matthews in Chip Kelly's offense, Bruce Ellington actually is a vertical threat. I mean, like a very good vertical threat. Not that Jordan Matthews can't have some long gains. He had plenty of them last year, but he's not known for that. Bruce Ellington can become known for that, and if you get him put up against a safety, he's going to have the advantage there. It's not just him beating linebackers or getting open in zones. He can beat some people in man because of his speed. So what he does after the catch, he's a little bit more rugged for his size than you would expect. I wouldn't call him a Steve Smith type, but he might be in the Steve Smith city. He's not in his neighborhood, but he certainly in this offense could really do some nice work. So I don't really have a better answer for you of anybody that we haven't discussed. I think that he's a really fine candidate.
Yeah, I always get curious with the out of nowhere. It's like, nobody's talking. Well, I'm talking. We're all talking about that, but interesting in any way you slice it, Bloom. Your thoughts on Ellington and any sort of surprise in the preseason?
I mean, Ellington is maximizing his ability to get on the field and play a big role in this offense. I'm a bit alarmed. There's a decent Torrey Smith buzz train this offseason, and I still think Torrey Smith is an excellent receiver, better than anybody gives him credit for. But I'm a bit alarmed that Colin Kaepernick and Blaine Gabbert are splitting the snaps 50-50. There doesn't seem to be a clear leader. So I'm looking at Colin Kaepernick and how he played last year, and I'm looking at Blaine Gabbert and thinking, well, if you can't beat out Colin Kaepernick, I'm worried about you. But let's remember, now I know Chip Kelly will run more plays. I know that Chip Kelly, his offense might create more opportunities, but we didn't want to go anywhere near that passing game last year. It did not matter. Now, you take Anquan Boldin out, maybe that helps concentrate the targets on Smith and on Ellington. I don't know, but I still see that 49ers offense, especially if Kaepernick is the starter, with the exception of Carlos Hyde, which has his own interesting debate, as a Superfund site, as a toxic waste dump. And I just think that Bruce Ellington, while for deep dynasty leagues we're stashing him or watching him grow as a player, even in the 18th round, and I'm not going to talk you out of any late round pick, but I want to tell myself a story that makes it somewhat easy, at least not very difficult, for a player to have a breakout. And maybe because Ellington would get a lot of short passes, but that's the other thing. Like, I don't think of Colin Kaepernick as a touch passer. I don't think of Colin Kaepernick hitting those nice little swing passes out of the backfield. I don't.
But what did I always do with Crabby? It was always those drag routes are like 5 yards across.
Yeah.
As soon as he'd roll out, it was such an easy throw. He's a pure sight thrower. He's got to see it. He does not throw with anticipation, and that's where I thought maybe Ellington could be like Crabby for him.
Yeah. I mean, I'm open to the possibility, but I just remember how we were despondent. Was watching the 49ers offense last year. You just want to turn off the TV in the first quarter, and I don't know that Chip Kelly can turn it around that quickly. I'm open to it. I'll certainly be interested to see how it goes in preseason. But I just think we all went into training camp thinking Blaine Gabbert is going to be the starter, and Blaine Gabbert will at least make some parts of the passing game functional. With Colin Kaepernick vying with him, now I feel like I have to revise expectations on the 49ers passing game until we see how this turns out.
Jim Tomsula, though, he's gone, and we don't have Meatball anymore on the sideline to watch it. So
It's Chef Boyardee, ladies and gentlemen. It's a spicy meatball. He is Jim Tomsula, and his favorite film is Moonstruck. What's Jim Tomsula's favorite? I always use Tron. I use the Tron for everybody, like Jack Del Rio. Like, Jack Del Rio's going to screw it up for the Raiders. His favorite film, you think he's an offensive visionary? His favorite film is Tron, for Christ's sake.
Is it something like 8 heads in a duffel bag or something like that?
I think it's actually, see, I'm looking it up. It's The Sound of Music.
Wait, there's the power of the internet. We know Jim Tomsula's favorite.
It's the Sound of Music.
The Hills Are Alive.
Hills Are Alive.
Is he sure he didn't have it mixed up with The Hills Have Eyes?
Sure didn't have something mixed up with his twin, Ron Jeremy? Oh, and there's
Carl
your sorry
from
Joe.
Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Well, look up the Jim Tomsula as Carl in Aqua Teen Hunger Force is one of the more brilliant mashups I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, we need more Aqua Teen on this show and more Metalocalypse drops. Could someone please do cocaine in the NFL so we can bring back Dr. Roxo? I would like that. Anyway, we're wrapping up the show tonight. Dr. Gene, quickly, as people talk about reclaiming and getting their careers back on track, I just wanted to toss this around because, well, Kansas City fans don't like me, and I don't really like some of them. But come on, Nick Foles? Seriously? Andy Reid, he's going to get the best of Nick Foles. Yep, that's why you're Kansas City. Keep it up. Hey, we're 8-8. Yay! The quest for mediocrity continues in Kansas City. Nick Foles, Dr. Gene. I think nothing comes of this ever, but interesting anyway.
Interesting to Nick Foles, maybe? I don't know. I got nothing.
I'll interject here on Nick Foles.
Go ahead.
I will.
Save me, please.
To me, what's interesting here is that there's a second-year option on this contract that's going to be between, depending on incentives, $7 and $16 million. Now, this year was only $1.75 million. So, to me, that is Andy Reid and John Dorsey saying to Nick Foles, if you eventually start this year and play well, then you can be our starter next year, and we will pay you like a starter, because Alex Smith gets $10.8 million next year, but none of it's guaranteed. We're going to be out of the guaranteed money portion of the contract he signed. So I actually see this contract and the terms of this contract showing, at least creating an impression for Foles and Smith, that the starter for 2017 could be decided by how this goes, and maybe that would make them more open to, going ahead. Sorry.
You never want to screen capture there, Bloom. Matt's the champion of screen capture, though, because he's voting for Pedro.
That's Nick
Matt,
Foles.
I would have rather just seen more of Aaron Murray. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, or Kevin
Tyler
Hogan.
Bray.
I let Kevin Hogan.
Kevin
get a
Hogan?
little work.
Yeah, Kevin. Come on, Kansas City. I mean, this is a team that hasn't won a game with a quarterback they've drafted since 1987. But come on.
Yeah, well, I mean, Elvis Gerback, Nick Foles, Alex Smith. I mean, hey, look, I mean, some team, New England and wide receivers, Kansas City and quarterbacks. You can kind of find junk piles with every team that they kind of have one of those drawers that you pull out and has all sorts of crazy stuff in it. I think the quarterback drawer in that team may be a little bit on that in that end. But then again, give Andy Reid credit. Alex Smith did make some gains last year. His deep ball he was actually throwing the ball downfield a little bit more often. Maybe he'll start throwing it down a little bit more often this year than what he did last, and keep building on that and have a revival to his career. I'm not holding my breath on it, but certainly there's some hope. Reid has done a decent job with quarterbacks in his past.
Alex Smith's air yards per target was up from 5 yards. 5.7 yards, still worst in the league. Yeah, she said baby steps.
Baby steps, that's right.
Baby steps.
Andy Reid's favorite movie.
Is there 3 Men and a Baby? Let's talk obscure movies. And Andy Reid, Bloom is Googling it now. Andy Reid's favorite movie. It has to be something with food, right? Like meatballs or ratatouille or something. I don't know. That's just a guess there. Bloom's trying to find it.
I am.
Is there any moments?
We know his favorite barbecue, so this is the best. What came up instead was his favorite barbecue place in Kansas City.
Is it Ray's Barbecue?
Hold on, and I'll tell you. It's not. I like Gates. I was a big fan of Gates Barbecue.
You're a Gates guy? Yeah, Gates, Ray's, good stuff.
Fiorella's Jack Stack.
Yeah, Jack Stack.
Yeah.
It's good.
It is good.
I haven't been to Arthur Bryant's yet, though.
We'll make it happen. We'll make that trip to KC. Matt, we got to get you out to Denver, baby.
Yeah, man.
We'll make that happen. To wrap up the show, is there any not injury? Okay, just let's remove injury from the conversation. Dr. Gene, starting with you, is there any thing in the preseason with any player that you're like, I don't like what I'm hearing? Like we talk about, Sammie Coates and Sterling Shepard. By the way, when the reports come out like Sterling Shepard's, yes. They did play college football. We do have years of film on these guys. Like, Sterling Shepard's an effing stud. Are you kidding me? Like, oh, my God, Odell Beckham Jr. was out, and this guy, Sterling Shepard, was so good. Yes. I'm glad that you've woken up, Giants media. Is there any because we got the Carson Wentz. Like, Wentz is struggling. I watch Paxton Lynch every day, and it's pretty hit and miss with the kid. But, man alive, the tools are there, and speaking of tools, I have to deal with some of that on social networking. Like, Paxton Lynch, what a bust. I'm like, because he had a couple of bad days of practice doesn't mean it's a bust. I don't have an moment off the top of my head, knee-deep in training camp every day at the Valley. Gene, is there anything that gets you curious? You're not hearing the things that you needed to hear. Not injury, but something else, just performance-based.
Yeah, I've been spending a lot more time on the injury and defensive beat, so nothing comes immediately to mind that attracted my attention so much that it caught me looking away from some of these other things. So I'll let these other guys take that one and run.
Matt, is anyone out there going
Yeah, if DeAndre Washington can't protect the passer, then it's going to be because I've liked him in somewhere around the 11th or 12th round in a lot of my fantasy drafts. He's certainly an kind of guy. Or if Allen Hurns is losing targets to Julius Thomas on the level that we saw down the stretch last year, then there's going to be some there from one of my favorite wide receiver threes.
Bloom, any for the first
two
week?
Big two big ones, okay? And one of them is right there in Dove Valley. No quarterback emerging in Denver, and it doesn't look like Dallas has traded for Josh McCown yet, so you can get in Elway's ear.
No, let me ask you this, because I handle this question a lot. Why is that such a concern to you when in terms of quarterback efficiency last year combined, Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler were 33rd in the NFL? Their quarterback can be better just because of the system and
it's true,
not
but
making mistakes.
You just don't want to risk your team becoming demoralized. We talked about this off the air, that you can do some play the defense off against the offense. Wade Phillips can be like, we'll drag them to wins. We don't care. But you don't.
Philadelphia.
And then Philadelphia, that's the other uh-oh with quarterbacks. So when I hear out of Denver and Philadelphia that all three quarterbacks are getting snaps, that no quarterback is distinguishing themselves, I see a potential for a demoralized team. And for fantasy, I see offenses that I'm afraid of. I see offenses that have very little chance of exceeding expectations when at this point in training camp, none of the quarterbacks are looking like someone that you want to be starting for your team. And that when a team has to march a quarterback out there, again, I got to mention the Bennett brothers article and there were comments on Sam Bradford. Just when a team has to march a quarterback out there that nobody has confidence in, you see it in the way the team plays.
Well, as long as everyone else does their job, they'll be able to move the ball. Such run heavy. I was going back and forth today with people like, why is Demaryius Thomas a wide receiver 2? Because they're never going to throw. That's why. He's a wide receiver 2 and a low-end one at that, in my opinion. Emmanuel Sanders is a wide receiver 3, so it's not that. And Virgil Green's an interesting late tight end because it is going to be tight end heavy, especially in the red zone, where we know zone blocking can be a little discombobulated. But whereas I'm dismayed somewhat by the Broncos quarterback situation because nobody is emerging, and Trevor Siemian, the propaganda continues, I look at that revamped offensive line, and again, no live tackling, but these holes are freaking huge that they're hammering open every day against this Broncos defense, which is another thing to make me go, wow, I see a lot from this ground game. And I see Devontae Booker missing in pass protection. Speaking of that, that's something of note with rookie running backs. That's a wrap for the show tonight. Dr. Gene, final thoughts.
I'm just happy I didn't have myself on mute when you asked me that. No, I mean, we're getting the Hall of Fame game this weekend, yes?
Yes.
We're getting to see some things where we're going to actually see players on the field. We'll get an idea of how teams, at least in some vanilla offensive situations, want to align both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And hopefully it'll be a quiet next couple of weeks with injury talk.
Matt, you're up. Final thoughts.
Oh, love the Hall of Fame game. Getting ready to enjoy seeing some of the highlights of the induction ceremonies if I don't watch the whole thing, and just I will go on a parting, kind of just a little bit of an advisory note to you out there who are getting to be my age and older. Please drug test your grandparents before they send you to the photography place. Throwback Thursdays for you right there. Since I humiliated you, I figured I had to do the same for myself.
Photoshop.
Look at that. Look at that young shaver. You even had facial hair back then.
Look at the suit, man. Is that just like, I'm telling you.
Look at that collar.
Yeah. That was blinding. Look at that thing.
I think we're from Spaceballs. I think we're going to go plaid.
I think I threw it in a drainage ditch and put on some Toughskins with holes in the knees after that, just so that I could get right again.
Well, unlike Dark Helmet, I am not surrounded by a-holes, but I'm surrounded by my brothers, including Sigmund Bloom. Final thoughts, baby.
If Terrence West has a chance to start for the Ravens running back this year,
there's your uh-oh.
Yeah. That's it. This is the world that we're in. We're in a world where Colin Kaepernick being able to compete with Blaine Gabbert is a good sign for the direction of his career.
And that's a wrap. Again, everyone stay tuned to the Audible. We're doing the preseason watch list. We'll get that thing taken care of. Check out footballguys.com for all of your fantasy football needs. Listen, you love the Audible. We love you. We appreciate each and every one of you for listening. Your love and energy drives us. And again, that human connection, man, we love you as much as you love us, and it's reciprocated. So thank you all for listening, for the fantastic Dr. Gene Bramall, the great Matt Waldman, the stupendous wave that is Sigmund Bloom. I'm Cecil Lammy saying thanks, stay tuned, and stay frosty.